Welcome to Peacock Alley. This is Gary Emineth with your host, Dale Wetzel.
Greetings.
Good evening, Dale. We're hoping your voice can hold up tonight. I know you're fighting a cold and all that other good stuff.
I fought the cold and the cold won.
We're going to see. I think you're going to beat it tonight. We're going to give it a try. So we're broadcasting live here from Peacock Alley, and tonight is Teeny Tuesday, Dale. So those of you out there driving, Teeny Tuesday means 2-for-1 martinis. So it looks like everybody in Bismarck's down here tonight having one of those.
Indeed, it does. I mean, I had no idea that martinis were so popular in Bismarck.
Well, they sure are tonight, and they have $2 off on appetizers until 10 o'clock. So
maybe that's it, too. It could be the appetizers as well.
They do a great job in their kitchen. They got a great chef down here, Dusty, who does a great job. I noticed the restaurant's full tonight, so it's going to be a busy night down at Peacock. And I think everybody's getting ready to stay home for the next two nights when it's going to be 25, 30 below the next couple nights, so that people are maybe going to go out and have a little fun tonight. So I'm going to stay home tomorrow night because I don't have to be here. So, Dale,
I was going to say, you're going to stay home tomorrow night, but I can't.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
I'm envious of you.
So, Dale, busy day at the legislature today. You want to give us a little recap before we go to our guest and tell us, what happened up there today?
Well, one of the unusual things about today was that we had a couple of bills to raise taxes. And
oh, my goodness.
One of them, we have the sponsor of that bill with us this evening. We're going to discuss it. It was to increase the cigarette tax in North Dakota from 44 cents a pack to $1 a pack. The other one is a corporate income tax increase, sponsored by Park River Senator Joe Miller. I'm sure he would not describe it that way, but this is what the bill does. It institutes a flat corporate income tax rate of 4.67%. So right now there's a three-tiered structure of corporate income tax in North Dakota, and the tax rate for the first $25,000 of income is 1.68%. From $25,000 to $50,000, it's 4.23%, and for $50,000 or more, or I should say more than $50,000, it's 5.15%. What Joe Miller's bill would do is institute a flat corporate tax rate of 4.67%. This would keep it reasonably revenue neutral, and it would result in a tax reduction for folks who have more than $50,000 worth of profit to pay taxes on, and a tax increase for folks who have less than $50,000 to pay taxes on. We also have had a number of abortion bills in House Judiciary, or Senate Judiciary, I should say, the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's fair to say that they're all designed to prohibit abortion in North Dakota. They encourage the recognition of a fertilized egg as a human being, given that fertilized egg the full panoply of human rights. And it says one bill says physicians may not perform abortions in North Dakota. Another one says that doctors who perform abortions have to be licensed to practice in North Dakota and also have admitting privileges at a local hospital. And this would make it more difficult for the abortion clinic in Fargo. North Dakota only has one abortion provider, and it is in Fargo. It's designed to make it more difficult for them to be able to bring in physicians from out of state to perform abortions. It also says that a staff member trained in cardiopulmonary resuscitation must be present at all times when the abortion facility is open. And there is a similar law to this in Mississippi that was passed by the Mississippi legislature. It is now being challenged in federal court. And we had some bills to reduce income taxes on individuals and corporations. Those are fairly common in this session because of the budget surplus has attracted a number of tax cut bills. And Gary, I think I've prattled on too long here. Why don't we just get to our guests?
That sounds great, Dale. Let's do it. That's going to be a fun subject to talk about.
Yes, one of the bills that I mentioned earlier was a bill to raise the cigarette tax and the tax on cigarettes only, not tax on pipe tobacco or whatnot. The tax on cigarettes from 44 cents a pack to $1 per pack. And we have here as the sponsor of that bill, Representative Elliot Glassheim of Grand Forks. He's a Democrat. He's a former Grand Forks city councilman. He was in the legislature in the 1970s as a rebellious student. Now he's still in the legislature as somewhat more rebellious,
Old
older, mature gentleman.
mature. That's right.
And we have also Representative Patrick Hattlestead of Williston, who is a member of the House Finance Tax Committee, and he was one of the folks who listened to the presentation on this tobacco tax bill today. And first of all, welcome, gentlemen. And Mr. Glassheim, can you just describe why you introduced your bill and what it does?
Well, what it does is simple. It raises the tobacco tax from 44 cents to $1, so it raises it 56 cents. The purpose of the bill is not to raise money, however. We have sufficient funds in the general fund. The purpose of the bill is to help people stop smoking and to help teens not start smoking. And, you know, the financial impetus for the bill is that everyone who smokes adds to all of our costs for insurance, for Medicaid, for hospital non-payment, hundreds of millions of dollars a year. We all pay when people get from smoking, get cancer, get serious heart disease. That's all included in our premiums because it raises the cost of medical care for everybody. So this is an attempt to lower the cost by giving them financial incentives or disincentives for smoking.
How would, if we had a cigarette tax, a state cigarette tax of $1 a pack, how would this compare to our neighboring states?
South Dakota, Minnesota, and Montana are all upwards of $1.50. I think $1.70 in Montana, $1.50 something 6 or 7 in Minnesota. So we would still be significantly lower than our surrounding states, and we'd be significantly lower than the national average, which is $1.40 for all states and $1.60 for non-tobacco growing states. North Dakota's tax has not been raised, I know, at least since 1999, but somebody I heard today, somebody else in the hearing, I think said 1993 was the last time it was raised.
Yeah, it's been 20 years, yes.
Yeah. So going to $1 would not put us in the highest bracket. We're 45th in the country, 45th lowest in the country. So I'm always an incrementalist and want to go in slow steps, rather than giant leaps, and so I thought this would still put us in a reasonable position relative to all the other states.
So a doubling of the cigarette tax is an incremental step, huh?
Well, if you look at it as doubling, yes. But if you look at it as over 20 years, it would be more like 5% a year.
Okay. Representative Hattlestead, what do you think of the need to raise the tax on cigarettes?
Well, I guess, number one, I'm opposed to raising taxes. I don't see a need for that. Secondly, the question, I have two questions in my mind about the issue, and that's whether we want to use tax policy as a part of social engineering. We want people to quit smoking. I don't think there's anybody out there that doesn't admit that smoking is bad for you. There's enough literature out there. You'd have to have your head buried in the sand not to know it's harmful. But I'm not sure that tax policy is the way we want to do our social engineering. The second thing is we have choices in this country. There's a personal choice. Now, there are a lot of people that have tried to quit, and I think the smoking group has a great deal of money that they are using in an attempt to help people quit. And I've not smoked, so when Elliot talked today about the difficulty in quitting, I guess I'd have to rely on my addiction to chocolate.
Okay.
I'm not sure I could give that up either. But people have choices, and I think they have to make choices. And I would hate to think that we're going to use tax policy as a means of doing that. I think education, and I think the smoking group or anti-smoking group has spent a great deal of money at trying to educate people. And I guess I'm concerned that the young people who should be the most knowledgeable, because the schools flood them with information on the evils of smoking, don't seem to be buying the issue for some reason. And we see a lot of young people smoking, which is truly tragic. I mean, for the older adult, you make a decision, okay, that's your fault. But for the younger ones, you would hope that education would eliminate that situation. So far, apparently it is not.
We have this evening, we're going to be talking about the Facebook bill. It is a bill that says that an employer may not, as part of a job application or interview, request a password and username for someone who's applied for a job in order that that employer may access private information on a person's social networking account. The primary sponsor of the bill is Representative Ben Hansen. He's a Democrat from West Fargo. We have him with us this evening. We also have a couple of co-sponsors. We have Mr. Joshua Boshi, who is a Democrat from Fargo. And we have Representative Tom Beadle, who is a Republican from Fargo, a very, very Fargo-centric bill, but I'm sure it is of interest to anyone who has a Facebook account. Mr. Hansen, could you please explain to me what this bill does and why you put it in?
I could. And can I also offer you a lodgings, maybe?
I've already taken care of on that score. I appreciate the offer, though.
You bet. Well, basically what this bill does, there's two parts of what this bill does. The first part makes sure that if someone is to pass away, that their accounts within social networks are passed on to their inheritors, whoever they might be, as specified in their will. And the second part speaks to what you were talking about before, which is employers may not require personal access information into one's social networking account, whether it be Facebook, Tumblr, any of the networks that are out there, or will be created. And it also says that an employer cannot force you to log on to your account in order for them to view it. Anything that is public is still public. Anything, any kind of workplace rules, such as not using social networks at work, still apply. This is simply a privacy protection bill that has been passed in 6 other states this year by both Democratic and Republican legislatures, and I think I felt it was the time that we make sure and get ahead of this so we don't have to wait another 2 years before we do so with how quickly technology has been moving. And
just so that we're clear, this does not prevent an employer from looking at publicly available information on a social network about someone that anyone could look at.
Not at all. Absolutely not. That'd be impossible. A, that'd be impossible to enforce, and B, there'd be no point in that.
Before we get into that, I wanted to ask all three of you gentlemen one question. Did any of you think about what would happen to your social network sites and passwords, etc., when you died, and whether you should include this in your will? I thought that was a fascinating statement that Representative Hansen just made. Mr. Boshi, is that something that ever crossed your mind? What happens to your Facebook site when you leave this world?
Well, Dale, it certainly wasn't anything I thought of when I signed up for Facebook. But having worked on a college campus, I interact with a lot of my students through Facebook, and they have Facebook accounts, and unfortunately every once in a while one of our students dies. And what we've really found is that there's been a mix between, some students who their remaining Facebook posthumously is it's kind of a memorial of them. Every once in a while people are writing notes saying I miss you and whatnot. And in other cases, parents are contacting us trying to figure out, how do we shut this down? We don't want that out there anymore. We don't want people thinking that our son or daughter is still alive when in fact, this is very painful and it hasn't happened. So working on a college campus, I've definitely had to think about it again, and have given my parents the envelope to open if the time ever comes, and they can do what they want with that.
And can you tell us what you do? You mentioned your job on a campus.
Yeah, I serve as the Assistant Director of Leadership and Organization at Minnesota State University Moorhead. So I work with our student organizations and leadership programs.
Mr. Beadle, is that something that you ever thought about when you signed up for Facebook, is what happens to this site when I leave this world?
Well, I didn't exactly think about it when I signed up for Facebook, because obviously when I signed up for Facebook, I was a high school student, or actually college student, because at that time you could only be in college to join Facebook. And so I didn't think about it at that point. But since then, what I've noticed is when you see tragic accidents occur, like Representative Boucher was talking about, where you'll have somebody pass away, it does become a living memorial. This past spring, my girlfriend's aunt passed away, and her Facebook still is existing as a living memorial. It's being managed by her daughter, and it's kind of a way for people to be able to grieve. Similarly, when former Senator Bob Stengen passed away, his Facebook account was still up for a while, and then it's been converted, and then they created a Remembering Bob Stengen group, so that people were able to go there as kind of a living memorial. Because it really is kind of a new system that's out there and it's kind of a change of the way we live our lives, because now everyone's putting everything up online. And if you think about it, who takes real photos anymore? I know Gary just took one with his phone. There's digital photos everywhere. And so people put those on their social media sites. They don't keep a hard physical copy in the photo album anymore. And so if you want to make sure that you have access to some of those things, then really social media is the way to go. And this bill is not just Facebook that it deals with this, but it's all social media accounts. Because if you've got a Flickr account, I mean, that's social media. That's where a lot of people will store their photos or whatever. And that's kind of a place where people will go to remember stuff.
We have Mr. Robbie Thompson, who's the president and CEO of the Credit Union Association of the Dakotas. We have Mr. Greg Scheider, who is the attorney for the organization. And we have Mr. Don Vigasa, who is a Republican state representative for Cooperstown, and he is the assistant Republican majority leader in the North Dakota House. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Dale. Glad to be here.
I understand that there's a recent federal appeals court case that really has you all jazzed up, and let's talk about that to start with.
Sure. Thanks, Dale. Well, we've had an interesting last probably 10 days or so. Within the last 10 days, we've had over 3,500 pages of new regulations that have been issued by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that regulate financial institutions with regards to mortgage lending. All of these provisions were required to be issued by the 21st of January by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They were required under the Dodd-Frank Act, and for those that haven't heard, Dodd-Frank, federal law that about 2 years ago, 2010, was enacted, and there's a short read. It's a nice 836-page law, and it has a lot of provisions in there with regards to financial institutions. Really purpose was to address the financial crisis, and one of the things they did was they created a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and that transferred the regulatory authority from 7 different agencies into the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It also allowed for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to promulgate rules on the consumer disclosures on loans, electronic products, 21 different or 18 different regulations. We refer to it as the alphabet soup, the Reg A, Reg B, Reg C, those types of things that were all transferred over to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. But they couldn't do that until they actually had a director in place. They couldn't promulgate the rules on new rules until they had a director in place. And for about a 6-month period of time, they didn't have a director, so they didn't have some authority. The Treasury Department was fighting against the consumer groups in some respects, and there was different opinions about whether the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau had regulatory authority over certain things that they could do. And ultimately, the president tried to get a have someone confirmed by the Senate, and the Republicans blocked that and were threatening to filibuster if they were going to ever try to bring this person for confirmation. And so the president made the decision to appoint the director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, as well as 3 members of the National Labor Relations Board, to their respective committees during a recess period.
And who is this director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau?
The director is Richard Cordray, and he was the Attorney General for the state of Ohio previously. Originally, the thought was that Elizabeth Warren, who's now a senator from Massachusetts, was going to run this agency, but they felt they could never get her confirmed and have her get in there, so she just went ahead and ran for the Senate, I guess. So.
Well, anyway, you were talking about how there was a recess appointment made to get Mr. Cordray into his job.
Correct, and they made that. The president made that recess appointment, and it was caused quite a stir. During that time, the Senate claimed that they were still in session, and they had somebody come in, and basically one lucky senator got to come there every 3 days, gavel, and leave after 3 minutes. But they claimed that they never were out of session. That's the argument that they made. The president's argument that he was, that the session wasn't, in recess, and as a result, he had the right to make the appointment. Well, just this week, after all these rules were issued, the Court of Appeals, 3-panel Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia, ruled that the president's appointments were unconstitutional to the National Labor Relations Board. And there's a case that is moving through the system that actually would be a national labor that would affect the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. But the logic is that same day, same appointments. So the CFPB's director isn't actually there, so the National Labor Relations Board person and the CFPB both should not be allowed.
Mr. Scheider, could you tell us, could you kind of try to summarize for us what the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in the case that Mr. Thompson was talking about? As I understand it, they ruled in this National Labor Relations Board case essentially that the Senate was not in recess, so the president could not make recess appointments because the Senate wasn't in recess.
Well, the Constitution is very specific, and it says that if the president only has the authority if the Senate is not in the recess. The Senate has recesses going on all year long. And the way the Constitution is written, it seems to imply singular as opposed to plural. So issue number one is what recess is really being referred to. Is it the one in August? Was it the one in December? Which one is going to be? The Circuit Court of Appeals simply said, listen, the Senate was not in recess. Therefore, automatically you have violated the Constitution and your appointment is not proper. And because the appointments were not proper, all these regulations that were promulgated are void. So we are sitting with a situation where we really don't know. The big problem that we've had with Congress, with the activism that we have seen, is that the pages of regulations are monumental.
Mr. Thompson, is this part of the appeal of credit unions generally in this, essentially we have this image of large banks, jacking you around with fees and whatnot, and is that a market niche that you can exploit? We're small, we're smaller, we're community owned, our board members are people that you know. Is that a market niche that can be exploited?
Well, absolutely. I think that the credit unions, all of their decisions are made locally, so they're not shipped off to San Francisco or New York to make a decision on whether to give a loan. Here in Rugby, North Dakota, we make the decision here in Rugby. That certainly is an advantage that we have. The community idea that credit unions are cooperatives. They are owned by their own members. The members have a voice. They have a vote. And they have a chance to be even on the board of directors is very attractive to a lot of people to be part of that group of people that work together for the mutual benefit of all of them. And I would say that in the last year and a half, after what we referred to as Bank Transfer Day, we had about somewhere between 3 and 6 million people that changed from a national bank to a credit union. And we think that we'd like to see them continue to do that. We know that we're the best financial institution for the average North Dakotan, and I think that proves that part.
Can you explain what is Bank Transfer Day?
It was you're a big Facebook user, right, Dale?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. All the time he's on there.
So
I'm trying to keep him off a little bit. It's getting to be taking up too much of his workday.
It was a big social media campaign launched by one woman, 26-year-old, 25-year-old woman in California who got mad at their bank after they raised her fee on the ATM cards. And she started this internet thing about change your bank on November 5th of last year, or 2011. And that day, hundreds of thousands of people, after they went onto her Facebook page, went on and closed their accounts at their banks and went to a credit union. And then it just kept continuing and snowballing on until 3 to 4 million people actually changed to to a credit union.
So this was not something that was ginned up by the credit union industry.
We had absolutely nothing to do with it. We certainly, after that, talked about it and seen the advantages, but this was one person's their own power of social media.
Is it something that you intend to pursue in the future? Maybe make it an industry recruiting tool?
Well, I think that someone's trademarked every day is a good day for bank transfer day. So I think we'll be using something like that in the future. But it is about the fact that when you go to a small or rural or community credit union, you get treated the right way as opposed to when you're at a big national bank where you're just a number.
It is probably significant that you don't find websites with their entire dedication being to hating a credit union, whereas many of the national banks do have entire websites dedicated just to people who hate them.
Not only websites, but other organizations too, I think. We've been speaking this evening with Representative Marvin Nelson, whose voice you just heard. He's a Democrat from Rolla. He is a credit union member, and we've been talking to him about legislation that affects credit unions. We've been talking to Mr. Robbie Thompson, who's the president and CEO of the Credit Union Association of the Dakotas. And we've been talking to Mr. Greg Scheider of Bismarck, an attorney for the Credit Union Association of the Dakotas. Mr. Scheider, how long have you been representing credit unions?
Since 1972.
And how did you get into it?
That was your elementary school that you started that in, right?
I was really young. I was only 13 when I had my first credit union client. It was a friend who knew a president at the local credit union, and they needed a new attorney, and somebody recommended me, and that's how I got started. And then the Credit Union Association moved from Jamestown to Bismarck, and I was lucky enough to get at the account.
What appeals to you about representing credit unions?
The people. The credit unions are a complete co-op volunteer system. The board of directors don't get paid. They volunteer their time. They are concerned about their people. The profit motive is not the first motive. It's, they have the catchphrase, people helping people. In fact, that is reality. They're concerned about their members. They take care of their members. And the members own the place, and they're proud of it.
Sounds like an excellent recruiting speech for the next bank transfer day, Mr. Thompson.
That does. Good job, Greg. Appreciate that. It's like you've been doing it for a few years.
Greg, I wonder, do you have your Facebook page for these guys, or do you Twitter or Facebook? Or?
I don't Twitter or Facebook. I remember somebody emailing me one day and asking me if I would be their friend. And I thought, Mr. Rogers has died. And
he took his sweater with him, too.
This is Gary Emineth and Dale Wetzel broadcasting live from Peacock Alley. There's still an hour left before Teeny Tuesday all ends up. $2 off on appetizers and martinis, 2 for 1. I almost forgot what that was there, Dale. So.
Isn't it more than an hour? I mean, it's only coming up at 9 o'clock.
10 o'clock is when the cutoff is. Some of them are till 11, but tonight's till 10 o'clock.
Well, maybe if we go up and beg the bartenders, they'll extend it for us.
Well, we can hurry maybe before the show's over. So thanks for joining us tonight. Look forward to talking to you again tomorrow night. The legislature today from 7 to 9 at KFYR 550 AM.